architect. I have a master's and bachelor's degrees in electrical engineering. I'm an IEEE member, Microsoft certified in various levels. The name and the accent is because I am originally from Turkey, and I moved to this area about 20 years ago. I worked at iMation. iMation is a data storage company, consumer electronics. They're based in Oakdale with 1,200 employees, a worldwide company. And we are hiring. So if you're interested, go to iMation.com. There's a bunch of technology positions available. So if you're interested in cutting edge data storage and consumer electronics, please check us out. I enjoy doing these, and when I have spare time, I like windsurfing. I've been doing kiteboarding. I've been learning that for a while. I was a windsurfer back in 20 years ago. If you follow me on Twitter and Facebook, I do these, I post these out there. I like snowboarding. It's kind of new. About 4 or 5 years ago, I started that. Then I've been bicycling when it's not windy, and when it's not windy and it's not raining. I don't enjoy so much of this. I lived here about 15 years, and it's been a challenge especially this winter was very tough. This cul-de-sac in front of my house was emptied out 3 times this year already. It's been a challenge. And it was -19 one day. That was also I woke my dog that morning, and it was very cold, just around the blood even. And this was a year to buy a snowblower. So, those in mind. So we're going to talk about testing. Why do you want to test? Why you should care? And I hope that you're in this room, that you want to learn about testing. You want to get some practices in place. And I want to make some points out, why that's really important. We're going to talk about the Visual Studio 2010. We're going to have a couple of demos with what's been offered with the Visual Studio 2010, how that will help you, or at least get you some directions what you can do with it. I'm going to talk about test-driven development and behavior-driven development, domain-driven design. There's a bunch of buzzwords out there. My take on it, how I see things are working, and I'm going to contrast those out to you. If you have any comments, I'm willing to take. So as a show of hands, how many people are developers? How many people that use test-driven or driven test frameworks? Test frameworks. Good. Excellent. Good. Continuous integration. How many people are using that? Very cool. So this is really good. Last time I did this, there was very little people who really use test frameworks. So this would be good. We're going to talk about types of testing. This would be everybody using that would be a pretty good refresher for you, I guess. We can talk about that. This is something new in Visual Studio 2010. I'm going to show you a demo on coded UI testing. This is available, I think, in premium and ultimate editions of Visual Studio 2010. If you're an investor and subscriber, it's available to you. Also go back to database unit testing. This is very interesting. I like to see that built into the code. If you're doing a lot of database development, you can see that mismatch between the database and the code. So the database unit testing, really nice tool to have to test your store procedures, your tables, structures. So we'll do a demo on that. And I'm going to talk about the continuous integration practices. Again, I'd like to see that quite a few of you using continuous integration. Just wanted to show you that. And I'm using TeamCity, do a demo on TeamCity. I've used TeamCity. I've been using TeamCity and do a demo on that, and show you some unit tests and how it actually really helped us in a real-life example. How it worked for us. And I'm going to finish up with the conclusion and references. So this is a good group, but why do we do test? Because we know the bugs are expensive. Last year, it cost $59 billion a year worldwide, I believe, to fix those bugs. And this is on average, a developer makes about 100 errors per 1,000 lines of code. This is a study done by NASA and IEEE, I think was published several years ago. The other one is the canceled and overrun projects. They cost a lot of money. This was about $88 billion. It was in 2009. And I'm going to show a little bit of examples here. Does anybody remember this? Ariane 5. It blew out. The reason was Ariane 4 was the previous. This was from European Space Agency. back in '96, Ariane 5 was launched, they had the code reuse. They took the existing Ariane 4's code, but put it in the Ariane 5. But the problem was the trajectory was for Ariane 5 was much higher than this. So what happened when you hit the 64-bit to 16-bit end, you had an overflow, and the overflow was, the exception handling was disabled for another reason. Then the rocket itself self-destruct. So the loss was about $370 million at the 96 in terms of years. So the next example is F-22 Raptor, and this Raptor, when it was released, when the Raptor crossed international date line on its way to Japan, all the navigation units shut down. Again, this is crossing the date line. Luckily, this had a better ending because it was followed by the tankers, supply planes. So with the help of those planes, the Raptor fleet were able to make it to Japan. Again, this is pretty interesting. There wasn't that much discussion out there. It's just that kind of when you look at the resources, the Air Force doesn't really disclose what's really happened. But something to think about, right? And then recently, we have iPhone just failed to wake up its users. We heard that in the daylight savings time change. It happened again in January 1st and 2nd, and Apple provided a fix for it. So I guess, what can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? If you're in the medical industry, if you're working on a defibrillator kind of business, you can lose a patient. It's a bad thing. So better have your codes tested. If you're working on the social media aspect, the worst can happen if you lose a friend. But what do you do, right? So these are the things that you're going to think about, what you want to do, and just to kind of do on the practice here. Now I'm going to talk about development guided by tests. So obviously the TDD campground is coming from saying that we're going to write our test. If you write our test, it's going to make us a better coders. The process of writing a test is also going to drive our design. The more you look at it, you can see if I'm writing the code, is it too rigid? Am I going off tangent? Can I put that code in the helper class? Will it help me? Will it really help the code refactor easily? And the other thing is, it's not about just putting the defects out of the users. It's also about the team communicating your intention to their developers. How many people are coding in multiple development environments? Let's say 4 to 5 plus. So that's the thing. If you look at somebody else's code, the first thing I say to the other developer is, can I see your test? So that way I get a better understanding of what's the intention is. If they slap a code, if I'm using their code, I get to see how that really helps me and help the other people. Obviously, the other thing is that you can test your features, and you can tell your code the integration in the slides that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Feedback. Feedback is our fundamental tool. That's why we do continuous integration. We're going to do repeated cycles of activity, the sprint, agile versus waterfall. How many people are doing agile right now? Waterfall? Thank you. So those are the things, right? We got repeated cycles of activity. We want to get quick feedback in our process. We do development in cycles. When we get a new feature, the feature gets deployed to some environment, and those features we get, the team gets immediate feedback. And every deploy, the team also look at how we are doing how we're getting the what we're really deploying out there is really what we expect to see. A lot of times, if you have all these requirements out there, you get to see either the requirements may change, or what you're really coding against isn't what you expect to against the reality. So those are the things, a good place to check. Obviously, without feedback, your deployment is not going to be complete. There is a good book at the end I'm going to refer to, so those are the ideas that came from that. This is a typical pie chart, just showing you what the requirements, what we do in the typical development process. Feature coding, pair programming. How many people are doing pair programming? How many people think about doing pair programming? Thank you. So some people think, the managers, depending on where you are, but pair programming I think is very useful. If you think about it, I would suggest, pair with somebody for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour a day, and just to get some feedback. You don't want to do 8 hours, right? This is just ridiculous. This is not really the idea. But if you just do it in pair programming, you get a lot of feedback and get to see the other people's code. A lot of exchanges happen. You don't even know. Just keep an open mind. Don't be offensive. Don't really offend the person. Just have the keyboard exchange back and forth. Get some ideas going around. I think it's pretty useful. Integration testing, unit testing, and then releases. So any questions so far? Faces okay? Now I'm going to talk about the incremental versus iterative. So in incremental, we have our development stage. So this is kind of important, right? You don't want to develop the whole program. Okay, this is our layer. Here's my presentation layer. Here's my business layer. Here's my database layer. So what we're trying to do here, we take a slice, a vertical slice, and do one feature from top to bottom, and then add these slices as you just do in your project. So and you do that iteratively. And I'm not going to read the slide here, but this is just the idea: is just take one slide out and then do from top to end, finish it out. So that way you get to see one feature, and you also deploy that feature, and you get immediate feedback. Now, how many times you just started like stuck in business layer, doing all these business rules and everything, and then all of a sudden we try to plop in a presentation layer, you get a lot of mismatches, right? So easier doing this easy prototypes. How many people are doing prototypes? So that's something to think about. And obviously, when you look at the development and the release and test cycles, this is a typical, the cost of the bugs is going to go up. As you find out in the test cycle, in the development process. So the idea is obviously you want to push the quality upstream and put finding the bugs in the development process. So I'm going to show you about the tools that we can use to help us with that. And this is again, how many people know Stack Overflow, right? Jeff Atwood, Coding Nerd. So this is from that. It just works on my machine, having a continuous build environment. You get to see, okay. You get to see, is it really working? Is it really what I'm expecting to do? You get a call like the QA person calls you up and it works. You say it doesn't work. You say, oh, it works on my machine, but what exactly happened, right? You can not be using the same database. May have changed most likely, or some other code got out of sync. So those are the things, and this is a quote that I saw on Twitter, that I had a developer told me that I don't have time to write tests. That's the thing, right? This is the answer. If you don't have time to test, and when it gets deployed, then what's going to happen next? So think about that, just how you perceive yourself. Would you rather be the person to find the bug before somebody else does? It's up to you. Test-driven development, TDD. So the catch is, this is like mental change too. It's not just going to happen overnight. You have to think, give it some time to figure out. It really, some people see that as okay, I'd rather write a feature than just write and test every code, the method that I write. So with the test-driven development, you get to think about, okay, how am I going to do this? What feature am I going to deliver? It makes then you get to become a design activity in your code. You get to think more about your code. You care about your code too. You get to see, maybe you want to catch that exception. You want to test that exception handling if really that's what you expect to do. There will be a demo later on about maybe some validations and things like that. You may catch that. You're going to have some regression tests. With the more tests that you write, you can automate these tests. And I'll talk about the unit tests, different types of tests. But that will give you a battery of tests, right, as you do more, and then you get to, at each iteration, you get to run these tests, and that's how the continuous integration and immediate feedback is going to kick in. Red-green refactor, everybody heard that? Okay. And again, you're not gonna. This is the last thing. There's nothing you can do. Just gonna get rid of the bugs. You may not even know that you're doing that, but it's just gonna help you out along the process. Behavior development, driven development. So the difference is, this is the kind of new terminology, a couple of years ago, I guess. So it's the evolution of TDD. Now the difference between the TDD and BDD, the way I see it is, you're going to write tests that matter. What that means is an example that I heard. You have a database structure. You're taking an invoice, customer invoice, and you may just do insert an update, but you don't necessarily do a delete. So if you do a very full core TDD, it may tell you just run the delete as well. So, but delete really isn't a requirement for your business. So you just skip that part. You just go with the what it is the behaviors are asking for. Writing tests that matter. Obviously, as I mentioned that. And then test methods are named. They're real long names. Has anybody used any Rails people here? Any Ruby? So in that, there's a thing called Cucumber and Selenium, a couple of processes things that you can use. But it's coming into the .NET world too. I think there will be Watton and SpecFlow. SpecFlow is new open source requirements, executable requirements. If you know, as you may know, so how many people write requirements documentation? What's the problem with the requirements documentation? It's stale. So once you write it, and people read it, they'll have a different understanding of what you wrote. It's open to translation. You can't say, I wrote just one up 6 months ago, and everybody looked at it, and we gave it to the third party, they looked at it, and everybody is going, okay, well, I thought it was going to do this. No, not really, that wasn't. So the problem with that is, the requirements document, especially in Word format, doesn't have any teeth. So you can't really execute a requirements document. So if you use something like SpecFlow, you can have, say, okay, I have this condition as given this, that, and then I expect this. So there's some examples out there. I'm not going to go deep into that, but this is something coming up. I'll have there's going to be a link at the end. An MSTN article, there will be an MSTN article link to. There it is, okay. So that's the link that this just came out in December. I think Brad Stratton at Microsoft, he's also going to, there's another version coming out. It just came out this month as well. So thinking about how you write the acceptance test built into the unit test, and how you just do all this red, green refactor. So it's something new and something to think about. You typically start with an input, your output, so your system, you're going to implement the acceptance test. Acceptance test, I'll talk about it in a minute. Any questions so far? So types of test. I mentioned that unit, integration, and acceptance test. A unit test, it's just a piece of code. You just write on just one method. You don't go out. A typical unit test is not going to open up a database connection, talk to a call web service out there. It will be really self-contained, and it won't execute, and it will also need to run really fast. The integration test is, I mentioned about those vertical slices that we develop. So it's how those slices just talk to each other. So it's kind of how your components talk to each other. If you have a class that will go out and call another slice, and then how they interact. So those are the tests that you write. As far as the acceptance test goes, so this is kind of what the BAs people, that QA people will probably going to run, and it will be the whole system is going to be a black box, and you come from here are my inputs, this is what I'm going to output. And an example would be call a web service, and you have an output or report maybe coming out of your system, the database. So that's something like you can think about that acceptance test. And I don't necessarily see an acceptance test being run as a part of the continuous build, or similarly integration test, but those are the things that you may run. But unit test needs to run really fast, and they should be part of the automatic builds. The database unit test, this is something, again, new with Visual Studio 2010. You get to exercise your database structure, your schema is very important, because a lot of times, developers, you're working with a DBA, you don't necessarily get the latest schema, and you get to see some of that, and if you built it into your process as well, your stored procedures, if a new field gets added in or the name changes, so you're able to catch that right on the spot. And obviously, another nice thing about this is it gives you database isolation, so you have a sandbox system, and I'll show you a demo. Coded UI test, these are good. I think this is coming from the Selenium group. You get to see now, there's a new namespace added in VS 2010. With that one, you get to exercise how your website behaves, your page behaves, or your user interface. And you can click on things, there's recording actions. The action recordings get saved in TFS, typically if you're using the whole suite. From what I've seen, my experience seems like you really have to be with the Microsoft stack to do all this. And Team Foundation server needs to be in place and everything. Also, if you're better off with the team system, team manager. And web performance and load tests, I'm not going to talk too much about those today, but web performance, how your website deals, and then load tests includes web performance tests. The difference between a load test and a coded UI test is load tests are typically HTTP requests, so they don't necessarily open up a browser and things like that. They exercise HTTP stack. So it's just different than the coded UI test. Just wanted to clear that out, how that, you don't want to put that in there. Okay, now let's do a demo. Coded UI test. And this one I download this VHD. It's available from Microsoft. That's the link here. So Visual Studio 2010. How many people are using 2010? All right. No problem there. So I'm going to choose it's a test project available in 2010 now. Create an empty solution. In this system, I have the TFS running, and in TFS is the test center. If you haven't seen this, this is an available test manager, Microsoft Test Manager. So they take it out. If you haven't seen that before, this is a separate add-on. You have to have Ultimate to get this utility. What this allows you to do is connect to your TFS, and this is mostly for your test group to attach to your Team Foundation server and create recordings, and that's how that works. So the assumption here is the QA person has done all that for you. There has been a recording, action recording has been done and been checked into TFS. All the action recordings are done in the browser, and they get saved on TFS. So I just want to show you what I'm talking about. And they're also tied into work items. Everybody is familiar with those terms, work items, action recording? Great. So in this example, we're going to go, there is this work item number 41, has all these different, it's exercising a website, open up, so it's a Tailspin database, opens up this website, clicks on certain links on the website. It goes and adds to a quantity to a cart, shopping cart, then it changes the value. So it's going to do that 3 times with different values. So this is somebody that wrote on their QA team, and as a developer, you may just want to take a look at how that really works. So in this example, we're going to look at how this could be done. Let's put water here. So I'm going to delete this test. Oops. So Coded UI is available to you. You just click Add Coded UI Test right there. With that, you get to see it added new namespaces, testtools.UI_test. So new namespace available. So I'm going to use an action recording, an existing action recording for this, which I just showed you earlier. This is going to connect to your TFS, which goes in the same system. So I showed you ID is 41, just pop that in. So there is the ID, work item ID in the test case. So we go ahead and create that. It's going to create this canvas, UI map. And as you saw that earlier in the coded UI, it's just each function is going to come out and create it in this method. I wanted to show you here. Let's go take a look at this method call, or definition for that. So variable declaration, there should be a get. There is return is the force flyer hyperlink. Definition on that one. So the interesting thing that I want to point out here is just going to search your web canvas. So there is a search criteria that is going to go out. The hyperlink is interesting. The way it's implemented is they also drive that in the demo. So what they're looking for is, okay, give me the ID, name, target. So it's just do a bunch of searches, and it's going to get you this hyperlink at the end of the protocol, at the end of the call. And it's going to return this hyperlink, HTML hyperlink. Close that. Just to prove that it's working, or it should run the test. So one thing to be cautious about is you don't want to touch your mouse when this thing is running. So it's going to open up the Tailspin database. Going to click. There's all these. It's going to do 3 times. It's going to enter those 3 values. It added close browser. Open up. Click again. add to cart. It's going to put 0, do some assertions. The idea is, what happens if you put -5 and then you actually owe the person money? So it's not a really good business case, so you don't want to that. Okay, in this case, our case this succeeded. So far, so good. We're gonna put an assertion here, just to show you how that works. We'll put Open Explorer. Click on the Tailspin Toys. This is again available if you go to the website that I pointed out earlier. You will be able to see that. I'm going to click on Model Airplanes. Click on the forked coffee flyer. Hit Add Cart. So now I'm here. So I want to put an assertion, put another assertion to my code. The way you do that, you put generate coded UI test. I'm going to use coded UI test builder. Okay, it's just going to start a little macro recorder here. It's a little tedious, but I think we can get it done again. This guy. So just plop this over to this console that you're interested in. I'm not a big drop-down type person, but this is what the demo calls, so just bear with me here. So we're going to go and then text. We're going to put an assertion. Is it looking okay there? So I want to do an add assertion here on the text method. So I want to make sure the value is 1. So that value will be 1 after the browser closes. So with that, and you want to do generate code. It's called automatic code generator. Quantity should equal. So this is going to generate the code and just plop it into that line that I showed you earlier. There. So now with our thing in place, I'm going to close this. Close the browser, close the micro recorder, and then run the test again. Again, I haven't played with this in production yet, but this is something to call if you have the Ultimate Edition. How many people have used this? Anybody use coding like this? What do you think?
It's an interesting approach to developing more tests. I do wish that it supported more browsers.
I heard Firefox is available with the feature pack.
They just recently offered that, so that actually will be fairly helpful.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Personally, I got about halfway through writing coded UI tests this way for the project I was working on. Scrapped it all and went to live.
Thank you. I'm thinking this is kind of a little first attempt too, but just wanted to show you the 2010 features. So yeah, thank you. Good feedback.
Does this support Silverlight or is this just strictly ASP.NET?
I think it does both, I believe. I gotta look at the link again. And there's more articles coming out if you look at the MSGen magazine. I believe there is more. Good question. Any other comments? Alright, so this concludes that. I'm gonna close this project. Next we have
the lights can be dimmed in here.
Yeah, let's try that, right? I was looking at that.
There's some switches on the back of that desk. Nothing?
Color. That's program manager.
Just start flipping switches and we'll see what happens.
Video program value, these are classroom system power. Not familiar with this. Just looks like more on the. Yeah, I don't want to shut down the whole thing. Oh, there it is. Got a bunch of There's camera, screen, whiteboard. Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. First try.
I don't want to shut the whole thing down. So, okay, let's see what we got next is. Alright, so a couple of comments with the 2010. So the Service Pack 1 is available now, just came out early March. The new improvements, you have the help viewer updates, Silverlight 4 support, unit testing for .NET 3.5 stuff going on, IIS Express is available, SQL Server, CE, and Razor. Razor is a view engine from ASP.NET MEC3. And for Feature Pack 2, you get the code visualization and modeling, as well as the improved code UI testing. So there are just more features. I think Firefox support that introduced that too. If you want to change this is a good site. Just check out your studio style. You can just change your coloring and everything. Check it out.
It also removes your italicized for SQL Server 2008.
Thank you. That's not cool. So if something's given, something's taken. Thanks, good comment. Alright, next one we're going to have the database demo. Database unit testing. Code, so that is also available to you if you have the premium and ultimate versions. And that will be a different type, it will be a type of database, SQL Server 2008. And that will be a SQL Server database project. So let's just go ahead and create a new solution here. TCC demo DB unit. I want to make sure I have a database out there too. I don't think that script creates a database. So TCC DB unit, close enough. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is, apparently, let's just say your schema is given to you by your DBA. You know, that's an assumption, so you're not going to go ahead and create our table schema here, but it's pretty straightforward with this example calls. So you want to have a script available, T-SQL script. That's going to load that from a file. DB testing. It's just a bunch of tables and a couple of sprocs. That's going to come out with this. So how many people have seen this already? Playing with that? Few. I really like it because I think this is a good. I've been using this. I've started using this. It's going to really make an impact for a lot of when you're working with DBA, the database environment, the SQL Server. I don't think it probably supports other database too. I don't have it. If somebody has a question, I don't know the answer for that. Just letting you know. So we have a new. So our schema is created. It's going to be the schema objects, so DBO, make that a little bigger. We have 3 tables, event table, event path, student table. We have user procedures. So far so good. But now the script is created, this doesn't know anything about the database, so it's going to change the properties on the project. Let's go ahead and do that, if you could. Okay, and we'll look at the deploy. Create a deployment script. So we're going to run it in an isolated environment, and we want to deploy this database. I did forget to check it in last night. I was doing it, and my database wasn't getting anything. That's why. So make sure that you fix that. And obviously the connection string is empty. Just fill that up. And if I do select here, it's not going to find it. So I'll do it from there. Nice Windows demo. Put it into the connection server name, and that's the database being tested. It's a good idea. If you don't like it. How about that? Wow. This is interesting. So this case sensitive. Maybe I did type it right.
You missed a C.
Thank you. Shouldn't be, but okay. So now connection is done. One couple of things we need to do is to block. We're going to check that off for our database testing. So let's build this. and deploy it. Fingers crossed, and screw it up. It's good. Just check the database now. We should have our tables, stored procedures. So far so good. I like that. This is just a give it a developer. A lot of times I don't have I'm hearing the things like I don't have a database to test this on. It's blocked in, or somebody else's though. Now you get to have your own sandbox, your isolated environment. You can test scripts against your business objects or stored procedures, whatever you work with. How many of you have been using any ORM tools? Let's see. Link to SQL. And Hibernate. Entity Framework. Just ADO.NET for ADO.NET. Thanks. So now I'm not sure the judge is out there, right? Microsoft's database technology keeps changing. So this could be a good way to test these just within the bare metal SQL syntax. Has anyone looked at web matrix? Web matrix. Okay, so we'll go back to the database, the application. Close my. So you're going to see a schema view that's at the bottom, and that's where you're going to start writing your tests. So go to schemas, DBO, stored procedures. And it's pretty easy. I'm going to use a stored procedure for adding a student. So add, create unit test. Okay. I don't know why it defaults to Visual Basic.
It hates you.
Thank you. That will do it. So TCC,
TCCD.
TCC. Thank you. Really shouldn't matter, but you just put DB unit. Test, and let's go Sprout test. Just gonna create a new class in that. Again, we're gonna connect to the same database. Let's see, new connection. Paste the database that was this guy over here we talked about. Okay. I think you want these to be checked. State. Debug. Yeah. Nice. Came out. We're going to delete that unit test that was created, I think, earlier. We don't need in the class view. Oh, Solution Explorer. And how many people are using the multi-monitor support in VS2010? Like it? Yes. Delete this test. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward so far. We have the stored procedure definition up here. We're going to insert a record. That's what I'm going to do. Adding a new student record to that table. It's empty, as you speak, so I'm going to delete that existing condition. So there's a bunch of conditions you can assert here into your test, and one of them is a roll count. So I'm going to add a roll count. If you look at the properties on the roll count, you can put your assertion. Here at the end is you're going to expect one record coming back to you. So let's just fill this up. Okay. Let's see. You want to do. You execute that in the test. Test go. Windows. Test view. So this doesn't refresh itself, so let's just do a refresher. There it is. So that just came out. And then you click on it, run the test. If you're going to insert one record in the database, and it passed. So now, let's open up the database just to show it really worked. Quick query here, select. There it is. So I think this is useful. I'm going to use this. I've been using it, and there's going to be more. It's a good way to verifying your database structure, because there is always that impedance mismatch, if you will, between the database and then the code. It's a nice tool for, especially getting in the Visual Studio, being able to do that. Having the ORM tools that you mentioned about Entity Framework. Is anybody using Code First? CTP1? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So those are new things coming up. I haven't got the chance to look at those in detail, but I think they're pretty useful. So you actually start from your code, your business object, and then trickle down to the database. Okay. Back to. Any questions? Let's talk about the unit test. One of the demo. The unit test is a piece of code that executes another piece of code. It typically resides in assembly. I don't really tell you the whole crowd, but I think just as a refresher, I guess, this is a good crowd to unit test. No, and a unit test should be automatic, automated, repeatable. You should get the same result each time you execute. It will be easy to implement. It doesn't again call out 4 or 5 different layers of in your application. It should remain for future use. It's a reference. It's there for others to look at your code. You can use other objects, other frameworks. I use MOQ for mocking objects, stubs, fakes. You can fill it up so you break those dependencies. How many people know about dependency injection? Immersion of control, right? So those are the things that it should be run by anyone. It should run the push of button. That's we're going to talk about the continuous integration. It will run really quickly. You have a system under test, code under test, class under test, a couple of definitions I want to throw out there. In this slide we have the Visual Studio 2010 overview. I gave it as a reference, but you get in the test side of things, you have now manual test execution. You got some recording, prioritization, planning, test case management, code UI test, which we did a demo, UI automation recording available to you. Now I'm going to do a demo. This is a real life demo from before started the other one. So I'm going to kick up another VM here. So any questions, any comments?
Have you tried the automatic data generation for the database?
Would you repeat that? Data?
I saw when you were setting